obviously a very, very talented player whose career has sort of hit the buffers a little bit. So a bit like Marcus Rashford, a very good opportunity for him.
Yes, and obviously things going well for Villa in that transfer window, but not so well for Chelsea today against Aston Villa. This is what we're looking at in the standings right now. It is Chelsea just a point and a place ahead of Aston Villa. Don is still with us. Maresca said after the game it's Chelsea's worst loss of the season, Don.
I wouldn't go that far. I think they've had worse. Craig talked about the goalkeepers. I think the last time I checked, there was about 7 or 8, and their best one in Kepa's on loan down at Bournemouth. So there's some real strange decisions happening at the football club. On the pitch today, as soon as Villa got it back to 1-1, I think anyone watching the game realised or knew that if there was going to be a winner, it was going to come from Villa. Because you're looking at a group of Chelsea players now that have lost their confidence, and I think of Cole Palmer, where the start of the season he was scoring 3s and 4s, he was on fire, the chance that he missed, he scores that in his sleep at the start of the season. They've got a back line that's not trustworthy. Me, Shaq and Craig covered them in pre-season alongside yourself, Kay and Dan, and they were awful in pre-season, conceding goals. That's carried on towards the latter stages of the Premier League. I wonder if you just offered Maresca the conference, which I never really like to say in football terms failure, but I will say if they don't win the Conference League, they have to win the Conference League. That might be some sort of salvation in a European trophy, but they're just another team that's limping towards the end of the season. If you offered him, I don't know, European football and a conference win, he probably takes it, because at the minute they're playing themselves out the top 4 or top 5.
It's hard not to win the Conference League. We had the conference bracket the other day. Oh, my God.
Stevie loves a bracket. Listen, they've dropped 15 points from winning positions, and 13 of those have come since Boxing Day. Not great.
No, and the old second half of the season perils for Enzo Maresca, which he had at Leicester to a certain extent, but much more pressure on this one. Guys that were playing really well from at the start of the season, like Cole Palmer and like Nico Jackson, who superseded expectations. Jackson wasn't available today, but his form has certainly dipped. There's no doubt Cole Palmer's form has dipped. Yes, they've had problems at the back in terms of some injuries, but they have a big squad. The goalkeeping scenario is a big issue. It's a big issue for any team, and I don't want to put too much kudos on the goalkeeping position. But you do need, I mean, there's a reason why the big teams winning leagues had the Edersons and the Alissons. There's a reason why Arsenal went out and got David Raya, even though at the time we thought Ramsdale was doing well. Is that position, dare I say it, is so important. And I think Chelsea have, it's not their only issue, but it's a big issue for them. And I said it a few weeks ago, you know, Chelsea have an ownership, I think, that has a very short memory. And I don't think they're even thinking about all that really good football Chelsea played in the first 2 or 3 months of the season when they were excellent. One of the best teams to watch, you know, getting forward, creating chances, playing with pace, all of those things. I don't think the Chelsea hierarchy are sitting watching videos going, oh, that was great, wasn't it? It's what can you do for me now? And as they start to slip down the table, they're in 6th at the moment, Villa are just behind them, Newcastle are just behind them, who play tomorrow. Are we saying if they finish 7th or 8th in the table again, he's going to survive that? Even if he wins the conference, I'm not sure he will. I think they'll write him a cheque and they'll go a different direction and find somebody else. That's the business we're in.
I think they'll keep him because they've just made so many mistakes in the past. And at some point, you've got to rein in some of the mistakes that you're making.
Do they?
No, well...
They've done the Tuchel, and then they were buttering him up, then they buttered Potter up, then they buttered Pochettino up. Where are they changing their spots?
Well, no, at some point, their spots have to change, is my point. Not that they've shown any history of it or any likelihood to, but at some point, to at least arrest this Chelsea slide, they've got to. And that's my point. And I feel that in so many ways, both Chelsea have boxed themselves in terms of their squad because they've spent so much over the last couple of years, and they thought the best thing to do would be to put players at 8 and 9 year contracts. And now you have this overly expansive squad on very long contracts that you can't shift. And then Maresca boxed himself in by ostracizing a significant portion of that squad. That they're not training with me early in the season. While it was great, when things were going great early on in the season, now all of a sudden you're wanting to change things and maybe call on some of that very deep squad you have. They're not playing for you. They simply aren't. And that kind of the goalkeeping position highlights it all. It's 8 goalkeepers on Chelsea's books right now, and they cannot get that position right. how you have 8 goalkeepers, how you accumulate 8 goalkeepers over the last couple of years, and none of them are good enough to take you to where you want to be. Now, if you're mid-table, Jurgensen and Sanchez, they're fine. But if you really want to be competing at the top end of the table, which I'm sure Chelsea ownership will say they are, I don't know how you manage to get that wrong. And that's just one position. Across the entire park, you could arguably say the exact same.
But if you're Enzo Maresca, you're not, as you sort of tumble down the table, you're not sleeping well, you're waiting that phone call, because this is the way this club has operated. Not just with this ownership, but the previous. Now, I know it was a different model when Abramovich was there. It was big stars, it was experienced, it was older players. But there was still a hiring and firing policy. If you were successful, you stayed. If you were not, you were out. And thus far, that is how this ownership has operated. Now, maybe they'll say, well, young kids, there was some green shoots during the season, so we'll give it, if this continues, it might not, maybe they'll pick it up. But if this continues, maybe they will look and say, well, there was some green shoots and the young kids, maybe they will have a common sense approach. Personally, I'm not sure that that's the way they'll go down that route. And that's why I think for Enzo Maresca, it is a very uncomfortable position that he now finds himself in, and a very surprising one after the first half of the season. As for Aston Villa, it really looks like they've got this January transfer window right. The signings clicking today. Well, they've got recruitment. I think Monchi's there behind the scenes now, and they've got so they've got their recruitment right. They got their management structure right. They have an excellent coach in Unai Emery. I think, hopefully they're looking at longevity. They brought in, obviously, Rashford on loan. They brought in Asensio, I think, on loan. Yes, they lost John Duran, but they had this stupid bid from Watkins that they were never going to take. And so they have 4 or 5 in that front line. Daniel Malin came in. Malin came in, sorry, again, a pacey sort of wide player that can maybe play through the middle as well. So they have some options there. They have a great draw, obviously, in the Champions League. I mean, Club Brugge will say the same thing. I think Club Brugge and Villa, it's a very sort of 50-50 game. But they've been a little flat domestically this season. It looks like last year and maybe a bit of the Champions League might have taken its toll a little bit, but they could finish the season strong. And it's good to see, a player who's had a lot of stick, Marcus Rashford. He looks like he's got a bounce in his step again, throwing a few step-overs, beating full-backs. And Marco Asensio, who has played at arguably the biggest club in the world, his career just has hit the buffers there in PSG, but they're talented players. And, it's a bit like we were talking about with La Liga, when you can go to your bench and have people that can make a difference within a tight game, then Unai Emery has the ability to do that in the forward areas, because these players, whether they start or come off the bench, are all game changers at the highest level. So a very, very good window and a good bit of form with the performance against Liverpool, which they could have won, and this performance today where they've got 3 points. Do you see that as a deep enough squad now, Don, to make a good run in the competitions that they're left in, a successful one by their own standards, Aston Villa?
No, they've still got that result in them. If you remember, they played Ipswich last week when Ipswich were down to 10 men and they drew that game. They threw some points away. I mean, the signings that they've made in January, I think, were excellent and needed. And Craig's spot on. Rashford looks as though he's a completely different player. He's playing with a smile on his face. The pressure's off. By the way, it's not a good look on Man United and Amorim, the players that have gone away, and the likes of Scott McTominay playing well at Napoli, the likes of Anthony, who's scoring goals at Betis, and now Rashford playing well at Aston Villa. I'm not sold on Villa yet, okay? I think they've still got that result in them. I mean, the Bruges game, and then if they get through that, if Liverpool go past Paris, they'll meet each other in the quarters. That could be tasty. But I still think when you look at Villa and their form after Champions League games, they've dropped points. They're still in it because I think anyone from Man City downwards, including City, from about Man City to about 7th or 8th, with back-to-back wins, could jump. I think Newcastle have got 2 games in hand, I think, now on Chelsea. So they could jump on the same points as Man City tomorrow, if not go 3 clear with their game in hand. So I think from the Champions League spots and with the coefficient really strong, you're looking at a Champions League 5, they've still got a chance.